Metamorphosis.
Oh, they printed it out so I didn't have to.
Good evening, it's 5:30. We're gonna call our meeting to order this evening. As folks are getting settled in, good evening, everybody, it's good to see you again. We have a full agenda for us tonight, but before we kick into our agenda, I thought I would just provide some options for the public to participate remotely in the meeting. So our task force meetings are currently conducted both in person and virtually. Members of the public may attend the meeting via Zoom, webinar, or conference call, or in person. To watch the meeting, it's available on Comcast cable channels 16 or 859, online at www.burnsville.mn.gov/meetings, or PEG TV Roku channel. You may speak during the meeting by telephone or via Zoom conferencing service at no cost. You can notify the city clerk if you wish to speak to an item at the meeting, or if you have questions about connecting to speak during the meeting. To call into the meeting, dial 651-372-8299. And we will be monitoring the Zoom feature for anybody who is joining us through Zoom. And if you'd like to make some comments, we will be watching for that as well. So with that, I'm going to get back to my agenda. And tonight we have 6 items before us. The first one is the adoption of the agenda. And since we do not have a chair or a vice chair at this point, I'll go ahead and convene the meeting, and then we'll get to that point, item number 3 on the agenda. So if I could have a motion to adopt, do I need a motion to adopt the agenda?
Not really. I think we just do by acclamation until we get operating as a chair.
Okay, so we can forego that.
Yeah, unless anybody has any changes or additions to the agenda.
Any changes or additions to the agenda tonight? All right, thank you. The next item is the approval of minutes. So within your packet were the minutes from our last meeting, July 28th. Are there any questions or feedback about those minutes? Hearing none? Okay, we'll look for a motion to approve.
Point of order, when we
Please.
say in our packet, I'm only seeing the official code in the packet, so,
The packet that was emailed out.
okay, that's what you're referring to.
Yes, it is. Did everybody have a chance to read that when we sent it out last? I think it goes out on Friday. Okay. Okay. So yeah, we only provided the copy of the code we're reviewing tonight, so thank you for that. With that, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Andrew? Seconded by Jensen. Donna, thank you. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And the motion passes. Thank you. The next item is discussion of a chair or a vice chair position. And we have this with our other commissions, and really the goal of this is to have two of the members act as a chair and a vice chair to help facilitate the meetings. Don't worry, staff will still prepare the packets and the minutes and all that good stuff, but we would be looking for someone to take the lead, help kind of convene the meetings, facilitate the meetings, help with consensus of the group, ensuring clarity, and then when we do report back to the council, the chair and the vice chair would be those that we would invite to do that presentation to the council. So with that, I'd open it up for questions, or if anybody's interested in that role, or what the will of the group is.
I have a question.
Yes.
How often do you expect there to be reports given to the city council?
I'd have to look back at the schedule, Andrew. I think we had indicated every several months, if I recall. Yeah, so it wouldn't be regularly. It would be, maybe twice a year.
Gotcha.
Does that mean you're interested?
I am.
All right. Is there?
Process, how do you want to do this? Just if there's interest, somebody raise their hand?
Yes, and I don't know, if you want to make the decision tonight, we certainly can. If you want to, kind of get names out there and see if people are interested, and actually take action at the next meeting, so it's really up to the group. So we have one person interested in the chair. Yes, Joshua?
Yeah, I could take interest in, I guess, following up as V.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yeah.
All right, we have, yes,
Vice Chair.
vice chair?
Yeah, I would
Okay,
be
we've got a couple
interested as
folks
well.
interested in vice chair
Can
position.
I make a motion to make Joshua the president and Stephen the vice president?
My name's Andrew, but I don't know if you
Oh.
meant to say him. But,
sorry.
no offense if that's what you meant.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so we got a
Michelle was interested too, though,
Oh,
right?
sorry.
I would be more interested in the vice chair
vice chair. Okay.
backup.
Is there anybody else that's interested in being the chair, taking on that role? It won't be painful, I promise you.
What would the duty differences be?
The vice chair is really a backup, so if the chair isn't available, we would look to the vice chair to convene the meeting, facilitate, or attend a council meeting.
Sure.
It would be, it would also be somebody, the chair and the vice chair, you know, I can meet with them before the meeting if there's any questions about the agenda or suggestions.
Sure, okay.
Okay. So what would you suggest? You take you need to take a vote, or how does the,
Well, if we only have one candidate
Candidate?
for the chair with the motion, we can just call for the vote.
okay, so, well, the motion was for, did you mean for Joshua, or excuse me, for Andrew?
I'm sure you meant Andrew.
I meant, yeah, I heard a voice come up from over there and I don't have my glasses on and I read the wrong sign.
Fair enough, all right. So we have a motion for Andrew to be the chair. Do we have a second for
I'll
that?
second.
Thank you, Shelley. Motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion passes, and welcome, Andrew, you're our new chair.
Thank you.
And we've got a couple folks that have indicated interest in vice chair.
Several mechanisms, either show of hands for the respective candidates or a motion and a second, and, so that was, the show of hands for the various candidates is a little bit better, because you don't then have to go against the motion first, vote negative on it, so my recommendation would just be, the candidates give a few comments and then have a show of hands.
This is just like speed round here. Okay, so we've got three folks that have indicated they're interested in the vice chair. Is anybody interested in sharing a little bit more about that?
I guess I will if the gentlemen aren't stepping up. It's actually just something that I enjoy. I'm willing to serve as backup. I do a lot of the code review stuff at work. I do all the new laws and have to read them and go through and figure out how to implement them for the company. So just kind of general leadership.
Thank you, Shelley.
I guess for me, similar, interested in the code review. Lived in Burnsville quite a while, worked in Burnsville quite a while. Familiar with Robert's Rule of Order and those kind of processes, so. With my time, I think it could definitely be the backup, but I don't think I could be the chair. I'm helping out at 360 Community as the vice chair there too, so. I should be able to do this in that capacity, I would think. All right?
I could probably help make it a lot easier. I mean, I stepped up just because of, my background and my career, being an architect and dealing with code. But at the same time, I am doing a fair bit of travel too, so I'm glad that others spoke up too, because I think that that'd be kind of my downfall, is just availability consistently, so just being honest.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you. So we've got two folks that are still indicating an interest. Does the group want to make a selection by show of hands? Or is there any other discussion you'd like to have?
Would people prefer to have a secret ballot?
And we can leave when you vote, I don't care.
Well, it's still gonna be televised, so I'd make a motion that we have a secret ballot for
Okay.
vice chair.
Okay, that sounds fine. Let's see, we're gonna need some paper and, have some, would you
Are
mind
we
running?
free to make comments about the candidates? Not that I
Please.
know either of you. But in the spirit of diversity and equity and thinking about that lens with the code review task force, it might be nice to have a gendered balance on our leadership team. So nothing against Stephen, or nothing necessarily in support of Shelley.
Shelley.
Just a thought about it generally.
While Greg is getting some notepad or some paper for us to vote, any other comments or feedback?
I second what he says.
Okay.
I think it makes sense. That's how a lot of stuff that I've worked with does it too, because I chair a caucus and we have our vice chair being a woman, because it just seems more balanced that way.
We'll just give, while we're waiting for Greg, I know we've got some of our members here that weren't able to be in person at our last meeting, so perhaps we want to go around and just introduce ourselves briefly while we're waiting for Greg. And maybe quick introduction, your name and how long you've lived in Burnsville and why you're interested in this opportunity. And I'll turn it over to our council member, our liaison here.
Dan Gustafson, City Council. I've lived in Burnsville 25 years now, 26 years.
And Dan's our council liaison, which
I'm a
means he will
liaison.
report back to the council on any updates from the commission or the task force.
That's why I had to figure out how to pronounce this last name.
We're doing quick introductions, Greg. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Nusma. I have lived in Burnsville now 6 months. I'm an engineer by trade and just very interested in local government and civics and a way to give back to my community. So excited to be part of this task force.
Thank you, Andrew.
And I'm Joshua Walls. I've been a resident of Burnsville for now just about 3 years. I've been a project architect for 20-plus years and dealing with a lot of municipalities, AHJs throughout the country, and it's been something I've wanted to do, to be on the other side of the spectrum and just be able to have that holistic understanding of the whole process has been something I've always wanted to do, and the opportunity was quite rare, and here I am.
Good, thank you.
Great to be here.
Michael.
I'm Michael Bryan. I'm chair of a disability political organization. I've lived in Burnsville for about 4 years. I really care about disability issues, so that's kind of why I wanted to be in here, because it seems like oftentimes in legislation and in city structure that people who are disabled are often forgotten when it comes to policy or crafting just everyday life. And I feel that it's not disabled people who have to work to mold into society. It should be society that tries to make it so disabled people feel more comfortable and can be part of society without having to jump through every single hoop and feel segregated from society.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome. For anybody who wasn't here in person or get a chance to introduce themselves last month,
I wasn't here.
yes.
Yeah. I'm Michelle Ward. I go by Shelley. I'm a compliance officer by trade, so I deal with a lot of diversity and inclusion issues. And when I saw that that was one of the things that they were really looking at updating in the city code, that it really caught my interest, and so that's why I applied.
So is, if it's okay, since we had done the introductions last month, if it's okay, moving on, Greg had gotten some paper, if they're still interested in doing a ballot for this. So if that's the case, we will pass the paper around, and if you could write the name of your choice for a vice chair.
And it's Michelle and Steve.
Thank you. Yeah. Michelle, you go by Shelley?
I do go by Shelley, but I will answer to Michelle.
We can get your name badge updated too, though, so.
Thank you.
Voting for ourselves.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, so why don't we just kind of- Thank you.
I'll wait till you
Yeah.
stay there.
All right, you guys are on top of that then. All right, never mind.
She's got Ginger's show. Yeah.
Right.
We're
Yeah, way
good.
to send them down. Thanks.
Oh, we have to have both raising hands too?
No, that was just to confirm. I'm good.
All right, okay. Okay, so, do you want me to read them out loud, or do you want me to just tally them up and make, you know?
Just tally.
Tally.
Okay,
Tally
let's do
there.
that.
No, it's all right.
Yeah,
Save the drama.
yeah, right.
People at home might be disappointed.
What was that?
The people at home might be disappointed.
They might have made for a really
Don't worry,
we're used to that.
Yeah, where's the drum roll? No. So by a majority, Shelley will be our new vice chair. Thank you for stepping up, both Steve and Shelley, for that. Appreciate. And Andrew, I'll turn to you if you want me to turn the meeting over to you for the rest of the meeting. Otherwise, I'm happy to help kind of work with you
Okay.
for tonight. Whatever your preference is.
Sure, I am happy to give it a go, and please feel free to interject with corrections and slap me down when I go off the rails. Okay, so I believe we'll move on to point 4, which is questions and comments from the task force. This is the agenda report and questions from the task force PDF. The task force members provided some questions and comments on Title I of the City Code. Campbell Knutson provided a summary of these questions and their answers. The summary is attached. I'm not for sure if I should read this. Would that be helpful?
When, Madam Chair and members, when the attorneys met this afternoon or this morning about this, we thought since it had been provided, it probably would be very time consuming to go through each question and answer.
Okay.
If people want, if they've read it and want more, a broader definite answer or elaboration or clarification, we would offer it, but it probably doesn't serve a good purpose of time to
Okay.
go through each question and answer verbatim.
Okay.
In general, the questions were just mostly clarifications or whys or what was considered, and our answers illuminate or try to answer those questions of why we have the draft, and I don't believe we made it, but 1 or 2 minor recommended modifications to the draft as a result of the questions.
Okay. Yes, Nancy.
Thank you. I submitted a question about the hearing officer, which I may not have worded it the way to get an answer that I was looking for. And I guess I'm just really confused about who can serve as a hearing officer. It sounded to me like they had a lot of latitude, including recommending that people lose their business license, which led me to think, gee, how are these hearing officers chosen? Do you just pick someone? Is it someone with some experience with the city? And maybe if you could give an example of what, I'm thinking, could you take someone's liquor license away and then they don't have a business anymore?
Okay, in short, the hearing officer language in the city ordinance attempts to provide a range of options that the person that wants to appeal can choose. Historically, an appellant could ask to talk to the city manager or request a panel selected by the city manager. In other cases, like liquor licensing, where the state statutes prescribe a more formal proceeding for those appeals under Chapter 14 Administrative Procedures Act, that would be the default mechanism for those types of things. And generally speaking, in all of those cases that are business licensing oriented, would go to the city council for final action after the hearing officer prepares a record. On some of the more minor ones, trying to think of some things, like maybe a minor code violation or massage therapist where it's an operational, perhaps a suspension, and the individual doesn't want to have the time and expense of an administrative hearing officer. We do provide some mechanisms for lower, faster hearing officers. A lot of cities are using it for dog cases, dangerous dog determinations where involving a state administrative law judge is a bit excessive for some of those determinations where it maybe just be a dangerous dog designation with, less than a destruction order or an impoundment order, type of those types of things. So the ordinance is drafted to allow some of that flexibility, depending on the nature of the appeal. But it could range anything from the city manager or a panel selected by the city manager or a non-attorney, say a veterinarian that specializes in the area of dogs, for instance, or animal issues, all the way to an administrative hearing officer paid by this, or employed by the state, but that the city would retain to come to create the record for city council action.
Thank you.
I had a question or a comment actually on a particular paragraph that I could not really understand. With the problem going through this website, I am quite sure where it is now and what the answer was. Is that one of the sentences which was split into two now? I am not quite sure.
Godin, can I ask a quick question? Is it related to the questions that were submitted? Or I know that our next item is to go through the code, and perhaps we'd be better served if we answer it right then, because we'll go through kind of, I think,
okay.
section by section, if that's,
Yeah, it
if
could
that's
be
all right.
that. It could be that. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Are there any other questions or comments related to the questions and comments? Otherwise, do I need to have a motion to accept? Or can I just move on?
You can just move on from that one. There's no action item on that. That's
Okay.
just,
Whole language was changed, you just clarified, correct?
Clarified, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Question.
sorry.
Excuse me, we have some process questions, but perhaps we can get to those at the end of the meeting.
Sure,
That's okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally fine.
Thank you.
So let's look over let's go to item 5, which is review Title I, chapters 1 through 6. And that should be the handout that you have in front of you. And I guess let's go through each section. And if people have, like Godin just had, as we get to the section where you had the question, let's bring that up and discuss it. I guess maybe a general question I'll pose is there a best format that we'd like to go through this? I know we're not necessarily voting on each section. I'm looking for direction either from people generally or from the staff advisors.
Is it possible we manage this by exception so that, is there like a general consent that we could just have that we accept this unless somebody has further discussion that they wanna do and either they say they wanna bring up chapter 2 or a specific point and then we revisit those points?
That's fine.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, that's fine.
Does anyone have a thought? Otherwise?
I think that makes a lot of sense to, otherwise we'll be here all night.
Okay. All right, so I guess then, Godin, you had a question on a particular item that you'd like to ask clarification on.
I put it in the comment box, and it's not a paper, I can't quite find it. It was one of the sentences which was hard for me to understand. Can you pull up the comment box?
I don't see that, but I might have
Is it in Teams?
documents we sent with all the comments.
I submitted in that box and
Yes.
there was a very difficult sentence which was hard to understand.
Okay, do you remember where it was at all?
I think it is probably 121, I'm not sure, but it looks a little different now here. Whether it has been modified, I don't know, but
Just for, Chair,
Oh,
just
no,
for,
122, I think is the, 1-2-2, public utility ordinances. No ordinance related to railroad crossings with street, public ways, duty, service. And that one sentence is very difficult for me to understand. And if it is difficult for me to understand, and I did go through to 3 people, one a high school graduate and another 2 retired people who had dealt with codes, and he said, well, all 3 said that it's very difficult to understand. It's 122.
very long
It is,
sentence.
it is 5
It is a long
Yeah.
lines long, so, yeah.
One had kind of commented as to put it into 3 parts, or 3 paragraphs or whatever, so that it's, like somebody said that in their application that I like this to be understood. You shouldn't need a paralegal to make a sentence understand. I think the same spirit that, I think it was President Carter who said that all regulations made by the government people should be able to understand it. So in that spirit, I think, I was looking at it from that spirit.
Absolutely. I think it's just for the task force to understand, pointing those things out are great. For us lawyers, we read convoluted sentences all the time, so we're used to it, and it doesn't necessarily faze us. So if you could point those out, and we can certainly, my understanding is that we're gonna bring this back for one final approval, so we could make a recommended change, and then highlight that. for the
What is
next-
the intent?
Yeah, my
of
comment was that
122?
122, after I read, I wasn't even sure whether I understood it right.
What is the intent, I think is the
What is the
question.
intent?
Maybe we can back up and.
One of the readers said, I think this is the intent. All the 3 people that I approached. Okay, sorry.
May I make a suggestion with regards to that? You started it with no, or whoever wrote it started it with no, and whenever you start, that is how people read it, so I can see why that's confusing to some people.
Can council comment on what the intent is?
This entire section is a savings clause that's intended to say that the city code, the broader code that we're working on, doesn't affect some other ordinances. And for background, some historical ordinances like franchise ordinances with electric, gas, cable television, other telecommunications or other public utilities are often not codified in what we refer to as the city code, because each of those ordinances by law are both a contract and an ordinance. And so they are somewhat negotiated with the public utilities as well as adopted as an ordinance. And because they have contract elements, they generally aren't placed in the city code. Some city codes do have them in there, and it's just a formatting and organizational structure. And so this is intended to say that nothing in the city code affects those other ordinances that exist with, say, historically railroads. We don't have any of those right now in ordinances that deal with railroads. But historically, those in public utility ordinances wouldn't be affected by the city code unless, of course, the city code provision says the intent is to affect those ordinances. And that's what this paragraph is inelegantly trying to say. It's carrying a lot of messages that says, we don't mean to impact those other ordinances unless we do, and when we do, we hopefully will say so clearly. That's the intent.
We could probably reword it a
This is
little
one
bit.
we inherited, we didn't draft new. And we probably should try to work to try to
Get paid less with that.
change that by either breaking it up or revising it.
Can I ask a question? Is this, is 122 necessary, statutorily speaking?
It depends, if we incorporate the franchise ordinances in the overall city code, probably not. If we keep them as separate documents, we should somehow reference that, what our intent is, that it has to be a specific override. Obviously, the utilities don't like to cede the authority that we can go back on the contract aspects of those franchise agreements by a subsequent city code amendment, which is one of the also reasons they like to see this language in the code.
Gotcha.
I'd like to make a motion that you rewrite this and bring it back to us next week. Next month.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very good clarification, and please point that out to us, because that's part of the intent of this group.
So as Shelley used the word motion, that would typically require a second. And right now, we're kind of in an informal discussion period. I think you guys understand the intent, but are we actually asking for a motion? Is that something that we want there to be? I don't know if that's,
It's really up to the task force. In other kind of drafting committees, if everyone is in agreement and a consensus, staff will just implement that direction without a formal motion. We kind of do that in many council work sessions, where the council just, if it's unanimous sense of the council, staff will just implement it, and then the formal adoption will come later. But if there is a disagreement among the group about whether staff is directed to do something or not, then in order to resolve that, I'd recommend we actually have a motion to settle that. But if everyone is in agreement on a non-controversial matter, my recommendation for efficiency would be just to do it by acclamation or direction.
okay. So if this is appropriate, then if you say you move it, then I'll say without objection. And if anyone objects, then we can actually have a movement and a vote. So without objection, okay. Do people have further questions on the code, items they'd like to bring up or discuss?
So maybe here's a comment or a question perhaps. So you mentioned that sometimes you have requirements in the code, sometimes you have requirements in the contracts with franchisees like utilities. Is that something you can clarify for us, which way it goes? So as we go through other sections, we won't come up with that question again? Does my comment make sense?
I don't understand exactly what you're asking as far as the idea. We will only have contradictions or non-code elements with the franchise ordinances.
Okay,
We also have ordinances like on zoning designation of property from single-family to multifamily. Those are also ordinances, but they are not codified in titles.
okay.
You know, we would put them as an appendix, or they won't be referenced at all. I don't think we have a decision yet on formatting of what we're gonna do with that, but different codes handle those differently. But those are also ordinances that are not codified ordinances. When we get to any of those types of situations, we'll try to identify those, obviously.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I do have one other clarification, not to muddy the waters additionally. The city has a policies and procedures manual, and we are currently reviewing that at this point too. And what we are, when you do this intentional review, we're seeing that there are some things that are in ordinance that are also in policy. So we will be working with Joel and the council on where they properly belong. So when that happens, we'll have those discussions with this group, so you know kind of where staff is at from it, and we'll be able to get your feedback.
Thank you.
And so by bringing Joel in, we won't accidentally delete it from both places.
Some might be okay.
Can you just clarify, I think you said, perhaps only minor changes were made based on comments and questions, or did you say no changes were made based on comments or questions?
I think to be clear, and Chair, if I may, maybe just to give kind of general overview of process so we're all on the same page. So the task force filled out the comments. Our office went through them and kind of separated them into two different piles. One is the questions, and I think that's a good way to do it going forward in terms of if you have just kind of big picture questions, we will compile them and do like we did for the last agenda item and try to answer them. Even if they're more specific about, you know, specific points of law or franchise, things like that, we can try to be prepared to address those. And then the specific edits. And we try to incorporate all the edits that were suggested in the draft that you're looking at. That being said, I think some of the responses in to the questions are talking about changing things for points of clarity. I don't know that those have been changed yet, but those can be tweaked for the next draft.
Is that something that you will do, or you are considering doing, or what would stop you from doing?
I don't think anything would stop us from doing it if everyone is in agreement that, I mean, it was just a little word choices to make things more clear. So we can absolutely do that if there's consensus for us to kind of make changes. And again, we're happy to highlight those so that the task force is following along with what we've done.
I guess I'd like to poll the room. I assume people had the chance to do the homework, but which was to go through the code and look at it and see if there were changes. But have you had a chance to look at the Dropbox and see if what the other people's comments were? I believe only 4 people suggested comments. Have you had a chance to, and I know this is our first time, so we're all learning together, but have you had a chance to look through them? Because if we're going to, tell them to go incorporate these changes, I want everyone to be on board with what those changes are from the clarifications.
I have,
Okay.
but
I saw what was brought up, and I also saw the response here, so I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
I checked only once when I was dropping, at that time there was one comment, but I didn't go through again to look at the rest of the comments.
I'd like to see the things that are incorporated as a result of the task force meetings highlighted in a different color, dare I say, something so that we can identify them and see, yeah, this is what we suggested, this is what we meant, it makes sense to us now. Because I don't know that in between meetings you'll see everybody reviewing everybody else's comments. I mean, ideally it's great, but practicality, not realistic.
Yeah, but it's also a learning curve too, for what other people are looking at or what would be matter to on that, since it's kind of a new for code on that. What did we find or what are we looking for?
I agree, the highlights would be useful in this, so we could just kind of go back and do that quick scan of, oh, did we touch on those things?
So I guess then, forgive me if this is I'll be blunt with this. Some people have color blind issues, so there's an accessibility question. If we pick another color and we pick a third color, will anyone have any difficulties reading them? I don't know how they want to surface those questions, if they have that concern. But is council willing to pick a third color, hopefully not yellow, but, and put the clarifications that we could see from our questions and comments?
Can I make a hybrid suggestion here? Is it possible that when we capture some of the changes, we actually create, is it possible just to create a matrix what basically has what was brought up and if something was changed and what section that was? To be quite honest with you, when I start seeing underline, strike through, and now different colors, this is just gonna become unreadable. And I am a very, very short burst of information kind of a person. So if there was like a summary or a revision, just a quick summary revisions that we can just take a quick peek, that'd be my, less pages I have to turn, the better for me.
Tim, would you be asking for like a change log, something like?
I come from the IT world, so that's exactly what I'm looking for.
How does council feel about that? Is that?
I think we can do that. And I think we're, again, kind of used to this red line format, but we'll take that and we'll try to get it into the matrix or change log, for those
Let me clarify what I just said too. I like this as the initial way to go with it. This is the good initial one, but if we're gonna do like revisions on top of these revisions, then you lose the chronological value of it. So we just have the revisions that we're summarizing based on what we did here on the initial through pass, would be great.
And would you include suggested changes that then weren't implemented on this change log? I'm not in the IT world, so I'm not exactly sure what you're referencing.
No, you definitely could, just to bring full transparency as to what discussions were brought up. I don't know if there's downstream value in that, but it could be for full transparency purposes.
So maybe as an example, back to the hearing officer clarification, it says currently, the city does not mandate that the independent hearing officer also be a licensed attorney. Many cities and other entities use independent hearing officers aside from the court system. So that's not an inherent assumption. So if that was, for example, just as demonstration purposes, if that was our recommendation, that all hearing officers be licensed attorneys, but that wasn't necessarily the official wording, but that was a suggestion that we're making, we'd want that called out. Is that what you're saying?
I guess that's taking it to another level that I really didn't think about it too far. I was more of just the simple fact of, is there a one-stop shop where I could just go in? I saw the revisions, I saw the input, now is there a one-stop place that I could just go and what was acted on after we discussed that? That's all I was really keen to it, so.
Gotcha.
My sense was, I read other people's comments, not extremely thoroughly, but it seemed like a lot of them were grammatical and capitalization issues and things I'm so glad I don't have to deal with anymore. But, so I'm assuming we don't need a change log to say we, formatted the word city to be capitalized all the time. That kind of thing. Unless people who made those suggestions really want to see it, I guess I would be looking for a change log on slightly more substantive issues than I would be on, consistent word usage and capitalization, that sort of thing.
I would agree.
Yeah, when we change policies and procedures, we don't track anything. We might say something, minor grammatical changes, but we changed this line item.
Yeah.
We only,
So maybe as an example, capitalizing city, we wouldn't list in the change log, but if, again, as an example, if the fine, that the appeals fee went from $100 to $200, that's substantial, we'd want to see that type of thing tracked.
Correct. That would be the intent or the spirit behind what I was suggesting.
But coming from a contract negotiation sense of, like I negotiate our teachers' contracts, our members always want to know, what did you propose and what did we not get as well? And so I would see value of if somebody said, well, we should get rid of the fee because it's cost prohibitive, and council and the city said, oh, that doesn't really work with this. It would be nice to see that this suggestion was not taken, so it's not lost sight of and nobody thinks about it ever again. So I could see some value in the substantive changes that don't get accepted also being included on such a list, just for coherence and remembering come next month, or seeing then I could see what Andrew had suggested but wasn't accepted, kind of in the same format.
Andrew, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead.
One more comment to the group. As I read it, I kind of need to see the changes in line, right? They don't make sense necessarily just in a log. I would still like to see something in line, even if we just bold the text that we changed in between meetings. It doesn't have to be a color, since I know there are some disability issues around that. Just something so we can track it easily in the code as we look through it and discuss it in the meetings as well.
Well, that's a lot that we've thrown at you. Did you have a?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Task Force, we actually, we had come up with kind of a template or a table to work on from kind of a staff level, that we were gonna track this. So I'm wondering if I can work with our legal team on figuring out what's the best way to do that. And then come back to the task force and you can figure out what is most effective for you to review this.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable.
We'll do that.
Thank you for the suggestions. I think I will be explicit and say, does anyone have anything to question or comment on chapter 1? Otherwise, we will call that one closed right now. Hearing nothing, I will move to chapter 2. Does anyone have comments specifically on chapter 2?
I guess my comment was on chapter 2. I didn't realize. I was kind of looking for,
Okay, let's move to chapter 3. Any comments or questions on chapter 3? Not seeing anyone, okay. Chapter 4, penalty.
Did someone not have a question in this for, perhaps under 147A about number of calendar days? It was not my issue, so I'm not sure how to comment, but.
Is this the one where it was, it was like 11:53 or something, or is this a different one?
I don't know what 11:53 means.
Oh, okay.
I did ask a question like that regarding the time of day, and there was an answer for it,
Yeah.
which was that it would be considered the same criminal offense, but it would be, I believe, if I read it correctly, it would be a separate day from a perspective of just a pure administrative sanction if you're out of compliance.
I think there was also, I think what you might be alluding to is section 155, there was a question about the 3 days. About, is it 3 business days or 3 calendar days?
Or the turnaround, I thought the issue was turnaround was, the expectations for turnaround were too fast. But whoever had that question must feel okay about it.
I think if it's all right, we'll handle 155 in this, once we get to chapter 5. A question that I had, I did leave I'll leave it I guess a suggestion or a question. It wasn't specifically purely about chapter 4, but if anyone got a chance to read my comments in particular on penalty, you may have seen that different cities have been looking at not using administrative penalties differently rather than criminal enforcements. So I might not explain this perfectly, but you maybe saw recently in the news that Minneapolis said they're going to stop pretextual stops. I think Brooklyn Center said that they would handle more things administratively instead of putting them through criminal courts. And part of, I think, the underpinning for that is they're using what would be, in our case, chapter 4, the penalty section, as the underpinnings for saying, here is our authority to say that you are guilty of this violation, and then here is the penalty to do that. Currently, right now, I don't think our city code supports that type of structure. And I think that we should have that discussion, but probably not in the vacuum of chapter 4 by itself. And probably not on really month 1 of the conversation. I don't know, I didn't see a response. I wasn't necessarily expecting a response because it was a very large question. So I don't know if that was something that you or anyone had planned to respond to.
Thank you, Chair. that was something I intended to visit with the task force at the end of the meeting. We have a couple process questions, and that would be another one that I would was gonna chunk into a process question. We
Okay.
certainly can handle it now or
Okay.
discuss it now.
Then let's come back to that then. And I will say, does anyone have anything else on chapter 4?
Is there anything, like say I'm in poverty, in order for me to, like, if like the fee, I couldn't find anything on this, maybe I just didn't read it properly. If there's like any way for, the fee to be based on like my income or something like that, because like, say like a fee for me, if it's like $50, that could ruin my whole month. Like, that would be something that would, you know, be devastating for me, which a $50 fee may not be something I could like even consider being able to pay if I have to think of if I'm going to pay rent or this. I'm just saying hypothetically, is there, are there ways of getting it in payments, or is it like based, like, is there like a way where you could do it based like on income? Like I said, if you're on SSI, you're only getting like $700 a month. Like, that's it.
Can I ask you a clarification?
Yeah.
When you say fee, are you referring to all penalties? Or are you referring
Yeah.
to the appeal fee?
Yeah,
Or-
like an appeal fee, because that would be something that would, you know, like if I wanted to appeal something, I may not be able to appeal it because I couldn't afford it, you know? Like, so I just have to just take it, and then maybe like, whatever, then the penalty for me is, I guess what I'm trying to think of how to word this.
No,
Can I interject?
Yeah.
We did kind of talk about this a little bit in the last meeting.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that we have to remember is, because we did bring this fee up at the last meeting, and we have to remember that by the time you get to an appeal fee, that you've already been contacted by the city on multiple occasions, and either A, have not taken the corrective actions or have not dealt with them. And I think, I don't know that, and I believe, and I don't know if we have it written in the actual code, but I believe that in the instances that you would outline, I don't see anywhere where you would be, if you were to respond to the city in due fashion, that you would actually ever have to pay any kind of an appeal fee, as long as you responded in due time to the city. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I had thought, because I remember hearing that at the last meeting, but it was just something that I didn't know if I fully.
No, and I think some of us had the misconception, it was like you had to go pay this fee just to even go talk to the city
Yeah,
about this,
right.
and the way that I understand that is not the case.
But I do see merit to what you're saying about.
Right.
This isn't the punishment phase, and so you shouldn't be punished. And if there's some sort of, if the appeals fee is $50, a sliding scale that's capped at $50 or something, I do see merit to that.
I was just saying hypothetically, like,
Yeah.
if you're on SSI, like if you have nothing, like pretty much, like you're barely getting by.
Right, and you're not the only one with financial hardship issues. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was waiting for a chair there.
I apologize, I'm still new to this.
I get it.
Please, Chris.
I'd just like to add to that a little bit, to the fee itself is an appeal fee.
Yeah.
And the hearing officer who hears this, if we get to that point, has some fairly broad authority on how we would apply any fee. What we really want people in there is so they have some, like we talked about the last time, some skin in the game, that they show up. And that's kind of it's kind of a placeholder for that. So if there's somebody who I may have a financial problem, I'm sure we could take that into consideration. Absolutely right, though. We don't get this far. We want to have resolution prior to that. So, does that help?
Yeah, it was more of just like, if there's, like I said, because if it's like a fixed fee, that could be nothing for a lot of people, and it could be like, really bad for somebody else, which is why I was wondering if there was like a way that it could be changed based on like a percentage of your income, if you asked for that option.
What we're doing right now is we're trying to work on some solutions for residents that might address those issues, so we don't get here.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying was if there was like an option for it to be a percentage, even if there was like, say, another fee or something like that too.
Yeah.
If there's like other fees for something, not just the appeal thing. I just,
We get so few of these right now that
that's what it sounded like.
I don't think it's gonna be an issue that we can work with it.
Is that a raised hand there, or?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification. I just jumped in and I realized I jumped in ahead of somebody. Process-wise, should I be waiting for acknowledgement from the chair before jumping into conversation?
In my opinion, as the chair, I will say that I'm going to do my absolute best to always be looking for hands and trying to catch those cues, but I may sometimes miss them. So feel free to wave at me, but also, I really believe that we are all citizens of this, residents of this city, and we are all equals. And so, when it comes to these types of discussions, I think as long as we can be respectful of one another, as I believe we all can, that I think we should feel free to engage in dialogue. There might be some times when we're having votes or actual matters of process where we need to follow a more delicate process, but I think that you're fine interjecting. That would be my opinion. I don't know if people have other comments.
You're the chair.
Okay.
Go with it.
Correct. Yes.
I really think that we need to, rather than just kind of gloss over and say, yes, the hearing officer has the authority to maybe refund the appeal fee if it was a hardship. I think we need to consider putting some hardship language in there just to allow for that, because when we see people with financial obstacles in the community, they may not file because that $50 may be their kid's lunch money, but they could still feel that there's been an injustice and that they want it heard. So I wouldn't want that to be an obstacle. And I think it just would be more inclusive.
Yes.
So my question is kind of stemming back to how long has this kind of a process been in place? I should clarify, in regards to having a set amount of money for an appeal.
The city has had an appeal process for many, many years on a variety of issues. Rental licensing, liquor licensing, those types of things have been around since the city was formed. This particular draft version was revised and adopted about 3 or 4 years ago. 2019 is at the bottom of the paragraphs. So it's been recently reviewed and updated and re-adopted by the council, particularly in light of some of the code enforcement cases we had, to try to streamline and take some of them out of the court system and put them into administrative procedures at the request of the courts that were dealing with some of those criminal matters that they decided should be more appropriately handled administratively if possible. So it's relatively recent. It certainly could still be improved, and some of that income sensitivity on appeal fees as well as fines can be refined with further review, so.
And second to that question, is there another means and methods or a way of going about getting that attention grabber without money being part of the subject matter? That's a loaded question, but.
Well, I mean, with times, there's summary abatement procedures where the city enters in the property, takes care of the problem. But even then, it's a question of assessing or charging after the fact. But, you know, money or personal liberties are generally what get people
Yeah, right.
conforming with ordinance or statutory violations, quite frankly. It's either financial or personal liberties that are at stake usually.
Thank you for the clarification.
And if I may, I think the ultimate goal is to seek compliance. You know, it's not intended to be punitive process. Chris and his team work
Yeah,
many
sounds like it.
contacts with property owners to try to get to that compliance.
Yeah, sounds like it, yeah.
Yes, sorry.
I guess I'm asking, based on your experience, it's probably unlikely for somebody like myself to even have to even be penalized on something like this if I'm just like a average Joe citizen and I don't like have a liquor license or run like my own business or something like that. But like, say, if I did have like a food truck or something like that, would that be like something where you could be penalized on this type of thing? Or like one of them parked or something, or it's some kind of like permit just to be able to sell something out of maybe your apartment or something like that? And I don't know if this would be part of that or not.
I'm gonna attempt to answer this.
Please do.
As best I can. When we start looking at, and I think Joel alluded it when we first got started here, to a regulated activity such as a liquor license, we pursue that on a different route. I mean, this has primarily been used and is intended to use for simple nuisance conditions, property maintenance items. I don't see that going to quite that extreme anytime in the future. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
I guess I was just curious at how broad these type of violations would be in like everyday life for like people who maybe are considering running like a business out of their apartment or.
Well, that's not illegal. I mean, we certainly have to take a look at it. When we find something that's clear cut, you didn't cut your grass or you left the big pile of junk sitting out in your driveway, this would be a route we would more than likely go down if somebody chose to say that was okay to have their big pile of junk in the driveway. But like I said, we tried not even to get to this point.
Can I ask you a question, Chris? Is it fair to characterize the interactions that you have with people as mostly related to property owners and property violations that are called in, like because Bob left his grass grow too long, or what? Can you characterize?
Yeah, our current program's complaint-based only.
Okay.
And what we're going to respond to are, other residents who might have concern about a property
Okay.
directly.
And then is it specifically licenses as well, or is it?
We may have instances, typically because council issues and approves the licenses, they're gonna have some say in what's the status of that. We're also bound by statutory laws, and say a liquor license along that line that we have to work with. They're a lot more complex.
So if I have a nuisance property myself, where I've left my grass go 20 inches long, impossible in this route, but 20 inches long, and my neighbor calls in and they call you come talk to me, and it goes back and forth several times before I would ever get the nasty gram from the city saying, pay up, or we're gonna come cut your grass.
You're probably gonna get a nasty gram at some point. Normally what we try to do is just send an informational letter out. In fact, I might have an example of that right here with me, where it explains what the code says. It gives some guidance, what the city's expectation is. This is our first step in enforcement, is, hey, did you know? And sometimes people know, sometimes they don't. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that we send to have been told many times. But we start with that. And then, if we don't see any response, any phone call, and this may be getting to our procedural point, then we may send out, and I hate nasty gram as a term. We try very hard to be cordial at all times and explain, here's the problem. Can you please take some action on it? And just another clarification point on that, all our documents have the appeal language in it. So I didn't know, generally is not an issue. What we really want people is to call us and say, hey, my mower's broke. Or, hey, my dad's been sick, and a lot of people do. And we do take that into consideration. Again, coming back to your issue about, we try to treat people and understand their situation too. They're not criminals. And this, I think, is the whole intent of this program. Does that make sense?
Yep. Eric?
I think kind of to that point, I would, second what Shelley had said a few minutes ago, I suppose, about hardship language might be appropriate in something like this, especially given that I guess it's my assumption that many of these sort of property nuisance comments in the complaint board are driven by health or finances in some way, right? Like, the average person doesn't let their grass grow 20 inches long just to annoy their neighbor. But there might be some reason, like their mower broke or their dad was sick, like you had said. And those would have some very real, like, time and health and financial implications for people in their lives if this was a condition that kind of went on. So I would see hardship waiver being kind of an appropriate addition or language in some sense here.
He said he'd like to ask Chris a
I'm gonna ask
question.
Chris, can you explain what we do when we find out someone has a financial hardship and they just can't do what we're asking them to do, and what our process is?
What we like to do and is find some resources for them too, whether it be through DARTs. We got a lot of community programs that are out there. This is one of the, in fact, I got a lot of these cases going on right now. We may, we can bring a horse to water, but we can't make them drink sometimes. And we can say, hey, call these people, these are volunteers that'll help you. You have a legal question, go to Smurl's, Homeline if you're a renter. We got a lot of options out there. They don't necessarily take it. And then our tools at this point are proceed with our enforcement process.
I still think it would help to clarify that maybe the hearing officer has the authority to refund the administrative fee if there's a hardship.
I've seen Donna's hand raised several times, so can I get back to you in 1 second? Because I think Joel wants to respond to something that was just said. Joel?
Melanie just pointed out, if you could go to, and this, our pagination is different on what document you have. If you go to 147, Administrative Appeals, then go to B3, which is the heading Authority of Hearing Officers, and I'll give you a moment to find it.
Oh, there it is.
3B of that section says that the authority of the hearing officer
Already there.
impose, reduce, stay, or waive any fees or civil penalties, either unconditionally or upon compliance with reasonable conditions.
That's what we need.
And what Shelley's suggesting is to either beef that up or highlight that, or we could add in a clause of or upon a showing of financial hardship by the appellant, or whatever phrase we would use, person making the appeal, or something along those lines.
I'm gonna get to,
Another
can I get to Donna real quick? Donna?
Well, I can come from the other side of using this for that clarification, because we do have my property as a rental license. So we go through so many inspections per year. So in this process is education, as he said, and trying to get people to do. I mean, I think I go through more trees than I can shake a stick at. Just for reminding people, you gotta mow your yard. No, you can't put that water heater out here. No, you can't put this here. And then, yes, here's the resources for it. But as it goes through, whenever we get, and we don't make a perfect inspection, you never are. As much as I'd like to do and as much as I'm gonna brag, it doesn't work that way, because what you find out is somebody has 15 extension cords you didn't know about, but you caught about it. Well, here's another way for us to keep everybody safe, because they come back and say, hey, did you know that's a code violation? So how fast are you gonna respond if you say, hey, you know, the city says that extension cord is a safety hazard, and here's a code violation. By the way, it references this city code on that part of it. So there's a long process getting through, and as long as I'm communicating with them, if I have to order a part. Because trust me, right now, appliance parts, it's 3 to 6 months sometimes. So as long as we're working toward a resolution, and all the years I've been doing this, and I've been in Burnsville since '95, that's their process on it. So when we get to the other side, they've gone through probably the whole entire alphabet except for Z first on that. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, that this is not all of a sudden, bam, you're getting hit with, you're just no good and all this stuff. It's like, what can we do to help you to get to this point? Communicate. That's the biggest thing in this whole thing with it, is open that communication and talk. And we know how difficult that is for people to come in and say, I can't do it because. And that's why this language is nice to have here, and that's why these departments have it that way. So that people don't feel like they're left out in the cold and there's no recourse, and you don't start a war with your neighbor. because they turned you in for your mowing or whatever else it was. So I just wanted to clarify on that, because we've been doing it for years now. And that's where it works the way it should work.
I guess what I'm hearing is that I understand the point is in, 3B here. However, if this is kind of a procedural document, it means that A has already been fulfilled, in my mind. So what I'm wondering is if there's some kind of a way to take some of that 3B language and readopt it to where, we're filing with the city manager. Is there a way that we can make an exception in 147A that the city manager can waive the fee based on it and, just have that gap stop, I guess, is what I'm hearing is what the desire is.
So specifically then, are you suggesting that there be a waiver mechanism on the hearing fee before the hearing has occurred?
Correct, because the way that I'm reading this is that I'm not gonna have a hearing officer until I actually pay the fee. If I read that and if I follow steps A to B, unless we're jumping right to step B, which I don't think would carry any water. So it seems to me that if you wanna put that stopgap that, hey, we can waive the fee in 3B once you come to the hearing, possibly I can waive the city manager can waive the filing fee based on an appeal and make a statement that says that is possible, because right now, it seems to me like you're not going to get a hearing officer, and if the general sentiment is we want to have some kind of a safety clause, that'd be my best suggestion.
Yes.
I kind of like that idea because I think that would address Michael's original comment, that there can be some sort of a review process for somebody claiming a hardship. But we also need to keep the skin in the game so that they don't have people not showing up. So, yes, there's a way around it, but the city manager would have to waive that appeal fee.
I think at that point, if they've gone back and forth and they've already gotten a judgment against them and they want to go and appeal it, the city manager can say, we've given you X, Y, and Z, we haven't had no follow-up, and we're not gonna waive this. So I think as long as you've been a participant in it, I think there would be some leeway there.
Tim, clarification, is your waiver just tied to hardship? Because that seems to be the what I'm hearing from Shelley and Michael, right? Mike? Is that it'd be tied to a hardship need, not just a general request.
Based on the conversation here, I would say, yeah, it's hardship, but I think if we actually had a longer conversation, we would probably end up saying it'd be a more larger issue than that, we could find reason to it, but I think for this right now, we would say hardship, yes. And I know like some of the things that you apply for the state right now, that if you are on SSI, then you do automatically apply for something like that, so without even any kind of discussion, so that's another possibility.
I think that my personal opinion is that a blanket a pre-appeal process for the fee puts an undue administrative burden, because then you really have to have a hearing to figure out if you need to have a hearing. And you might as well just have the hearing to instead of schedule the meeting to have the meeting. Yes.
I just want to make it clear that I'm not adverse to penalties or anything like that. It's more of just, I just wanted to make sure I understood the process clearly, because like, you can read how this is, and if you haven't lived it, or you haven't like experienced it from your perspective, then I'll never, like, I'm just imagining how these things work, and I don't actually know like the details of like how it actually works in real life scenarios. So, I do think like a penalty, it makes sense, it is a deterrence and everything. It just, I always want to make sure that there is also like a safety net, or, like a thing in case like there is a reason as to why certain things weren't met and that were out of control for the person.
Okay. If I can ask a question of the group, my feeling is that the concern is that there's not a codified safety net, but listening to Chris speak sounds like the process has a lot of safety valves built in it. If anyone just communicates, it doesn't sound like the city's gonna railroad you ever, as long as you're communicating.
The problem is some people have communication challenges, whether it is English second language, whether it is hearing impaired. A lot of different things could create that barrier. So I think there's a need to give them something tangible, even if it's somebody who's reading to them and interpreting can say, yes, you can do this.
So I think, thank you, that's a great point, and, I think that so I guess I would ask, I'm assuming that there are accessibility resources if someone can speak English.
Yeah, on all our notices, at the bottom, we have in 4 languages that describe what the appeal process is. That kind of gets to the point, as much as we can. We do have bilingual folks, our inspectors. I think we do a pretty good job addressing it. We also have Language Line. We have a couple different resources that we make sure and ensure that people understand what we're saying to the best of our ability.
Yeah, coming from the perspective of negotiating a union contract, I never want to rely on the good graces of my current manager who's going to enforce the contract. You seem like a wonderful person. Melanie, as city manager, I know that there's a lot of power for your position. You seem like a wonderful person. Should there be changes, then without it being codified in here, we can't rely on that. So I would still suggest that there would be something codified for that reason, even though we have wonderful people working at the city currently.
So let me turn that back to you and say the bounds of which we're debating is whether or not there should be a hardship fee appeal, and there must be some determination process then.
So can I step in? I don't think there should be an appeal. What I think there should actually be is that if there's something that were to happen, the appeal can be made, but when you file your appeal, rather than paying your cash, you say, I do not have the ability to pay right now, and here's why, but I would still like to make my appeal. I think those are gonna be very few and far between, but I think as long as you have that language, because then, therefore, you do guarantee to the resident that the city can't come back and say, no, that's not in our policy, and that's not part of it. Whether or not the city manager decides yes or no that you can waive this, I would say they're dependent on them. I don't think anything should be guaranteed, I think that once you guarantee something, that it gets abused. But I think definitely there should be a safeguard that says, if I have this, so that, and I don't think this will ever come up, I really don't, but I guess if there's a safeguard for the resident, that's where I would lean towards.
Chris?
I would add too that we have a administrative appeal process or policy that council has adopted too, that this may be an appropriate place maybe to put some of that language in there. We look to the policy for guidance on what council wants us to do. And whether, it truly needs to be defined in the code itself, I don't know. The policy is basically our guiding document. So something to consider.
How often does that policy get updated or changed without?
When council gives us direction to move in a different direction, is we might put together, some language that fits, and it's reviewed.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Chris, so the policy you're talking about, Melanie, is a policy document you guys are reviewing?
Yep.
So it must live underneath this, right?
All of our processes, in fact, I grabbed one here. This is our whole enforcement policy and procedure. Well, it lays out how we do things. Any potential penalties, what council wants us to do. And that's what we use from day to day.
So, can I make a proposal?
You may make a motion.
So just, we've talked about this for a bit now, and we talked quite a bit last time. My proposal is asking, I guess, Chris to take a look at what you've heard tonight, either at the policy level or at the code level, and make a recommendation on how you think we should best address the hardship issue that's been discussed.
Uh,
Does that make
with-
sense?
With the approval of the city manager, as part of our process, we certainly can, I think, take a look at
I
that.
think we want, my proposal is we should address it in one of two areas.
So, I'd like to clarify that. So I think what you're saying is that neither is to be handled statutorily in this document or in the policy that Chris and the city are reviewing, but probably not both places. And you'd like the experts to review that and get back to us on what they think is most appropriate. Is that what you're saying? So, would you like to make that a motion?
That is my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
What is the motion exactly?
Okay, so the motion is that we are going to defer to the city's representatives. I'm going to leave that expressly vague right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. To determine where the most appropriate place for consideration of a hardship appeal fee waiver to live, whether it be in statute, in city code, or whether it be in their policy. Been moved and seconded, so we'll do it by voice. Say yes if you're in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, that carries. All right. Are there any other items on chapter 4? Hearing none, chapter 5. Practically speaking, on that motion, does it seem reasonable that in a month that the city would be able to review and come with a proposal? Wonderful. The lawyers look confident, Chris.
There's 3 of them.
Did we discuss the fee for that?
Okay, any questions, comments on chapter 5? I think there might have been a question about calendar days or full days or business days. Yes, sir.
I don't know when it comes to reasonable accommodation for meetings. How is it, like, if say somebody joined city council and they were deaf, what, like, is there things that would be in there that we would have to add? Or is there like another thing, like another policy, like how some of the other stuff is done, where it has a thing in there where you would have, like, say, cart or something like that, or like somebody that can do ASL, if that person is ASL, or if you have somebody that's blind, if the things would be in Braille, you know, there's things of that manner. Like, how would when it comes to reasonable accommodations for that, is there already kind of like a billing or something like that you would have as a resource or something? Because like some of these things end up becoming somewhat costly in order to get like somebody that does captioning for some of the meetings, which is something I've asked for multiple times, but I've always forgotten to send in like emails prior asking for like captioning on some of the videos. Like right now, it would be nice if I could read what some people are saying. If there was like a live captioner. Now, if I was deaf or hard of hearing and I'm at this meeting, I mean, it may be difficult for me to be able to hear things from other people, and I have to be able to read their lips if I don't know, like if we don't have somebody that does ASL. So that cart with the captioner would be helpful, where I could read what's being said on the screen. You know, is there already a process for that to be done?
I have a point of order. Are you asking for accessibility resources for the meetings themselves, or if a person that needed that was to be elected to the council itself?
Both.
Okay.
ever since the ADA was passed and required to be implemented by cities, the city has accessibility guidelines, standards, and implementation programs that are periodically reviewed. And the city clerk primarily is the one charged with making sure that assistive devices are available and we're compliant with ADA standards for that. It's not in the city code, but it is in city policies and procedures, and we could probably get some of that information, that's additional background for you so that you're comfortable with how that's being done. But it's not in the city code per se. It's a requirement that we have to comply with federal and state laws.
One of the reasons why I do bring it up is because even though it's required, oftentimes it isn't implemented. Even if you ask for it, like even if you, like, what would be the timing process if say if I wanted to show up at a meeting, like a city hall meeting as like just a, citizen or whatever. Would it have to be like a 3-week notice type of thing? Is there like certain things like that, like that are in there where, if you didn't give us at least 3 weeks, there was no way that we could accommodate for this thing? Sometimes it ends up taking like that amount of time to be able to hire somebody that can do captioning for the person, or something like that. So I guess, is there anything like that in there?
What I would say is that we will make all reasonable accommodations that we can, given the time we have. Michelle, our city clerk, is probably the best person to speak to the specifics of that. And what I would say is, with regards to the system that we have in place, Greg, our deputy manager, can maybe talk a little bit about what we're looking for from an overall system. I know this is a little bit off, but I think it addresses your question, Michael.
Mike, members, we are currently in the process of evaluating some options that will enhance some of those capabilities for us. So to the city manager's point, right now, we'll take requests and do everything that we can to accommodate those requests. Moving forward, the council has identified capital improvements, and part of that process, and part of our budgeting process will be to make some decisions on when those types of things happen. But some of the things that you're mentioning, live time captioning, other accessibility features of this room or of our electronic capabilities throughout the building are things that we're considering in those projects. And accommodation and meeting the diverse needs of the community is something that's on the top of the list as we think from a staff perspective of what we're bringing back to the council for their consideration. So the short answer is we're considering those things, and I would expect in the next, even in the next couple of years, there could be significant changes to help enhance both our response time, but even eliminate the need for us to respond to have those types of resources readily available to the community all the time. So
Yeah.
that's our goal.
And that was sort of my question, is if it had to be implemented in here in order for you guys to have like somebody on board and the accommodation had to be requested in a certain amount of time.
So there's, is it fair to say that there's outside statutory requirements in the ADA that make it so the city has to comply? Okay. Anything else in chapter 5? I think you wanted to bring up the salaries, right?
No, I was, actually, I'm surprised that nobody caught how late we start our meetings during the day. You're not recommending like 1 in the afternoon when everybody else works.
I did think it was interesting that you're quitting at 10 o'clock and not 11:30 anymore. So that's.
We need our sleep.
All right, let's move to chapter 6. And this is basically all strike through. As we discussed last time, that was a change. Questions on chapter 6? All right, hearing none, that will conclude item 5, review Title 1, chapters 1 through 6, administrative edits. And then I will go ahead and give the floor to Melanie, who had some process points.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Within the comment period over the last month, we've had a couple process questions that I wanted to get the task force's perspective on. And Andrew, you talked about one of them is reviewing the civil rather than criminal. I'm gonna have Joel address any questions about that, because that's his expertise. So, do you wanna talk a little bit about Andrew's thought here? You want a minute to read it first, and then I can go to the other ones and come back to it. There was a couple comments about the time of the meetings. So just wanted to check in with the group. Is the time 5:30 a problem or a concern for the group? Or are we comfortable keeping it at this time and time of the month?
Okay, looks good.
Okay, all right, so we can, how about the turnaround time? Did you guys feel like the 2 weeks was a comfortable turnaround time for you? And there might be times when it's a little bit heavier and you ask for a little more time, and I think we would definitely do that on a case-by-case basis. But from a standard, the 2 weeks seems to be working okay?
I noticed that, this is obviously our first time doing it, but the files were not available until a week after the meeting, and so then if they were available tomorrow, then I would have time in that 2 weeks, but I only had, a week.
You should have, the files for our next meeting should be in this packet. So you
Okay.
should have that advance notice and actually have, I guess, probably technically a little bit more time. So if you're not seeing that, let us know and we'll make sure we get that corrected for you.
And should that be in the Dropbox?
It was in the packet, which is, I have to go also look back at Dropbox here for a second.
Within the agenda, is that what?
Yeah.
The agenda has, for instance, chapters 7 through 12.
Yep.
Which we would be asked to be reviewing, and so we could start
Yeah,
right
and
now.
that's on our website.
And then Title II as well, is that correct? Is that what we're also?
Yep.
Okay.
Review Title I, the rest of Title I, so chapters 7 through 12, and then all of Title II, which is relatively short. And so that should be, I'm just clicking on the website, that's there. At the back of the packet, I need to look at Dropbox to see if it's there as well.
Is there,
I'm guessing-
It's in the
just, you're using the term
miscellaneous
packet,
there,
and we're not going to find the term packet somewhere.
It's in the agenda that was
That's-
emailed
I
to
just-
us that is available
Right.
online.
So it's,
Sorry.
that's what you mean. I caught
Yes.
on, but I
Let's-
just
well-
want to be clear.
Clear language is helpful, so I apologize for that, absolutely, yes. So it should be under, is it presentation and reference materials? In the Dropbox, and that doesn't look right. Those are the present. So make sure that we've got it available for you in the Dropbox, because got the comment forms, okay. Apologize, let's make sure. Am I missing something?
If you go to the Burnsville website and go to the public meeting section, go to tonight's meeting and go to the agenda and click on the agenda packet,
Yes.
that actually has the group of PDFs, and then you can do a split screen. You can actually click right over here and it shows you all the materials that we're
Yeah, I was
discussing.
looking to see if it was also in Dropbox.
Sorry.
So, I'm not seeing it in Dropbox, it is available on our website, so would the task force like it in Dropbox as well?
I think that would
Put
be
it both-
useful.
Put it in both places? We
Yep.
can do that, absolutely. Okay. Any feedback for us on submitting corrections or comments through the Dropbox process? Anything you'd like to see us looking at a little differently or make it easier for you?
I just needed to clarify, the first time it made it look like all that was being asked for was very official kinds of things that we wanted changed, and I just wanted to make, comments and questions.
Yeah.
Which I then put in the section that says, what are your very official suggestions here? So, as long as everyone's comfortable that way.
Does
then
council
I'm
have
fine.
feedback for us?
I think the fewer places to look, the better.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of editors, a lot of readers, a lot of task force members. So if we can all kind of focus on the fewer number of places.
And just
I
use the
think it'd be more
form and,
efficient, yeah.
okay.
I had a question when I was going through, okay, well, this is kind of a stupid grammar mistake somebody made in edits, and this is a substantive change. I kind of didn't like that checkbox on the form, honestly, because am I supposed to fill out multiple forms, or can I just put it all in one form? And so I kind of ran into a little
I felt the same.
quandary with how to provide it to you, right?
It seems like it could be as straightforward as adding a line or a box or whatever of non-substantive or whatever kinds of, comments and questions, and then another one for, here's my substantive suggestion.
I don't know that we even really know what a substantive question is as lay people, maybe we just don't need to worry about that and
Yeah, and
let the attorneys.
My feeling is I wouldn't want to categorize, label, or then say this should be in this column instead of the other column. I think you've just provided, we'll run through the responses. I think we weren't really thinking on the answers to the questions about that next step, and we're already talking about some improvements, and I think we might need to indicate a little bit more clearly what we're going to do, where it's going to do, and then talk about, like we talked at the beginning of the meeting, whether it's a different color, if there's a different bulleting or highlighting to know that that recommended change or observation has been responded to or implemented. We'll have to work on that, but I don't think putting in a different category or a different page makes much difference.
Perhaps we just can get rid of it.
Yeah.
Simplify the form a little bit.
Or we can just ignore it.
Yeah,
I mean, why do the extra work?
We're in
I'm
government
sorry,
now,
I'm
so we've got.
Put your comments wherever you want to put them, and
We'll read 'em.
We'll read them.
Do we take attendance?
We do through, more informally. but,
Okay. Because it appeared that several members may have withdrawn. Is that correct, since?
That is, I'm going to my attendance, yes, we've got 3 individuals that have resigned, and we have indicated on the task force list, and we will continue to monitor that and update this on a monthly basis. And then from a record standpoint, we mark it in the minutes, who's in attendance.
Do we, does the council intend to backfill, or is this the group and we only potentially get smaller from here? Survivor task force edition?
Yeah. The council has said that, this is the group, and as folks fall off, the rest of you.
It would be difficult for someone to come in after a few months of this and try and catch up, because you guys are gonna get more proficient at this every month. And a new person's gonna come in, and all the stuff you've been going through is gonna get asked again, and you're gonna have to deal with that. And
Okay. Do you have other?
No, I don't think I do. I think I got all my process questions addressed that were raised.
So can you answer the civil versus criminal question, Joel?
I think pretty much already did when we discussed the administrative penalty section, which was adopted in 2019, to give the city an additional enforcement option. The city still reserves all the criminal proceedings available or civil injunction. The administrative penalties is another alternative enforcement mechanism that was implemented and expanded in 2019. As we go through substantive sections of the code, if the task force sees things that they intentionally want to decriminalize, you can specify that enforcement will be only civil or only through administrative penalty and not allow a misdemeanor citation. And we'll advise and discuss that as we go. But the mechanism's in place for moving some of that to administrative or civil rather than criminal.
Thank you.
It's on chapter 1. Okay.
I had a question, I think last week we had, I believe her name was Regina, and she talked about what the zoning commission was doing.
Planning Commission.
The planning commission, thank you. What commission has authority to say that a certain area of the city is zoned as residential 1 versus residential 1?
City council would act to the recommendation of the planning commission.
And do you know if the planning commission is looking at changing any of the current labels or changing any of the zoning of the city?
Yes, both as a result of the 2040 comprehensive plan update and just this additional review that they're undergoing regarding the form and structure of the zoning ordinance. They'll be looking at what uses are allowed in individual districts and what those district definitions are. So yes to all of that.
Okay. I saw that she had sent out an email about the district definitions, but I hadn't seen map redistrict, and I wasn't sure if that was something they consider at a much later point in their process.
They've already done some regarding the comprehensive plan. Will continue to do more as required.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a clarification? Does parking in residential areas fall under those here? So we'll get to that.
There's some both as far as the designation, but the parking ordinance, overnight parking provisions
Yeah.
will be in the code review task force jurisdiction because that's
All
what's in the code.
Looking forward to it.
Relying on you.
Oh, my goodness.
Can't even listen to that with a straight face.
You gotta last
We
that
haven't gotten to
long.
it yet.
Right.
All right, so our next stated meeting is Wednesday, September 29th. Our assignments and homework is to review Title 1, Chapters 7 through 12, Title 2. Please provide feedback within the next 2 weeks. I believe the only action items from the city that are outstanding is to upload to the Dropbox Titles 1 and 2. Secondly, to review the motion made by Steve, which is to review the hardship waiver and where it most appropriately fits. And then I think there's a third one.
The 122.
122 section.
2, yes, exactly. Okay,
And then we'll work on, from a process standpoint, on how to kind of communicate it more clearly to the task force, the changes and how that's occurred.
I believe I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned.
Second.